I'm Angela Williams.
And I'm Katie Sudano.
And I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse.
And I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse.
Welcome to our podcast, Voice Up for the Voiceless. Welcome to our very first podcast, Voice Up for the Voiceless, and I could not be more excited to be with my co-host, Katie Sudano. Katie, can you welcome our viewers out there?
Yes, welcome. I'm Katie Sudano, and as you heard, this is our first podcast. We're used to being on the other side of this, being interviewed. So today, I'm going to interview you.
And then our next podcast, I'm going to interview Katie. Because we feel like you guys need to get to know us. And we've got some really great surprises in store because then you're going to get to know our husbands. And then we'll probably have to kind of talk some about our kids, but we don't need to talk too much because we don't want them mad at us. But we are super excited. As we as said before, and if you're just tuning in, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse.
And so am I.
And we just feel like it's such a tough subject. It's such a tough childhood trauma to overcome. And there's just so much silence around the topic and around the issue. So we're hoping that Voice Up for the Voiceless can kind of break that silence and kind of take away the stigma, because some of these survivors feel so much shame and are just kind of trapped in that shame and that silence. So we just want to open a conversation about the issue and about the topic. Katie?
Yeah, and especially even as adults, you know, the trauma of child sexual abuse, unfortunately, is just, I feel like it's layers. I used to call it onions, but onions are stinky.
Yeah.
I like to think of them as rose petals.
Oh, that's so sweet,
So
Katie.
as the rose opens and we like kind of learn and grow into ourselves, I feel like some things kind of come up to the surface, and even though we're still roses and we're beautiful inside, the ugliness tends to come up. And so as adults, I feel like we need to talk about it more than ever. And with my history, I know that I've been silenced even as an adult, even knowing that we should talk about it. There's no shame in talking about our past or what we've been through. And I know it's hard for people to listen to, but we need to talk about it.
Absolutely. We've got to talk about it for a couple of reasons. One is we got to help survivors heal. So if you know a survivor or you are a survivor, we hope that you'll tune in with us every week and you'll share it. Let people know that, hey, these girls are having a conversation about something that is so difficult that maybe you have struggled with. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be interviewing survivors. So we're going to have a platform and really hold a space open for survivors to begin to tell their story, for survivors to be able to share their struggles, share what they've gone through. You and I, of course, will be sharing on every episode a little more and a little deeper. But I think that's a really important, that there is really no platform for survivors to. There are several out there, but there's not a lot of platforms for survivors to be able to open up and say, hey, this happened to me. And it's so, you and I had been dealing with survivors for what, 20 years plus?
Long time. We've known each other for
and all the stories are so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's family members, it's teachers, it's neighbors, it's doctors,
persons of authority.
Of authority. It's the gamut. So I think if you're a parent, if you're a caregiver, if you're an educator, I think this podcast is for you, because you're going to be able to start to learn some signs and symptoms and start to learn some really egregious behaviors that you can identify and maybe step in and protect a child, save a child.
Yeah, for sure. And also, too, a lot of times, like myself included, our perpetrators were never held accountable. So this is my way to say, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to say exactly what happened to me, because even though you weren't held accountable, I'm going to hold you to that standard so that we can protect other people.
Sounds good. We're also going to be interviewing advocates and really people that have devoted their lives to try to rescue survivors. Those in trafficking, those that have been exploited, those we know that pornography is running rampant right now in our society. So we're going to bring in advocates and people who are working in the trenches and really help understand what their work is, maybe some of their challenges. Of course, we know that funding is a big challenge over this issue as a whole, and just a bigger picture than that, mental health. That we're in such a mental health crisis. So I feel like it's going to be great for our listeners to really be able to understand more of the challenges, but understand what the different areas of expertise and of work in this issue, because it really ranges from those that are doing rescue, those in our justice system, those in law enforcement, those that are working in advocacy centers, of course, our mental health counselors and therapists that are working in this arena, to prevention, those that are working on prevention. So I'm really excited that we started our guest lineup. And
I know.
So if you're listening and you want to be a guest on our show, you can go to Voice Up For You and just contact us. And there's a little form you can fill out there. So
voiceupforyou.com.
Okay, voiceupforyou.com. Katie keeps me in check.
You keep me in check, too.
Katie's done a beautiful job on our website, and we're excited for you to go there. There's lots of information. There's downloadable books, so we'll be talking about more of that in the podcast,
some really
too.
good resources as well. So thanks to all your hard work, years and years of writing resource books that, by the way, the free download on the website is shareable.
Oh, cool.
And
I didn't even know that, Katie.
Yeah, you can share the link, and it's an amazing. It's called Tough Talk to Tender Hearts. It's so good, you guys, and it's geared towards all ages. And I think it's a great resource for schools, even, and counselors in there that have with children who disclose.
So we'll take a whole show to dig into that a little more,
for sure.
But let's just talk about how this came to be, because I think it's kind of a cool story.
Interesting,
because we have such a history together.
Okay, so when did we? So I'm supposed to interview you. So let me start. I won't do the questions we wrote down yet.
Okay,
but let's just talk about how we met. So how did we meet, Angela?
So I think I was trying to remember, when you're friends with someone for so long, it's like you go back to, okay, I know I loved her from the moment I laid eyes on her, but when did we first meet? And I think I had solicited Dr. Nick, which is her husband, who's an amazing chiropractor and a health coach. But I think we met soliciting when I had the nonprofit for donations for your business.
Actually, no.
Okay,
that's
I'm wrong.
not how I remember it.
Okay,
it was. I was in Bible study, and there was someone in my Bible study group that knew your organization.
Okay,
and she told me to reach out to you, but I didn't get to you. I got to one of your assistants or volunteers, and they said, well, why don't you come to Voice Today's offices? And I'm like, ooh, there's an office. And I'm like, okay. And I had long hair, just like now.
You looked exactly the same. It's been almost 20 years ago, Katie. You've not changed a bit.
Minus a little, But yeah, I was so excited, and I'm like, I'm a survivor, and I'm gonna rule the world, and I'm gonna help everybody. And I walked in, my big old high heels and my big hair, and you were there, and I was so excited to meet you. And you're like, come on to my conference room, and you told me you put up a PowerPoint. You started talking to me about all your stuff, and then you jumped right in. You're like, where do you want to volunteer?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So careful, if you call me, I will reel you right in, and I will put you to work because the harvest is great and the workers are few. It really is.
No, but then later I told you who my husband was, and then we got involved in that. But it was like an instant connection, you and I. The funny thing, though, is like I remember you told me, oh, you came in with your high heels and big hair, and you're all going to save the world. And then I go to her retreat.
Yeah.
And it's like I definitely was wearing a mask, which is okay. Like I needed it at the time. But the retreat really opened everything up and helped me heal, and kind of in a big way, in a positive way, humbled me, so that I wasn't this like business woman, I'm going to, save the world, to, oh my gosh, this is so prevalent, and there's so many of us out there.
So you make a great point. So I'm going to point out points because I think this is real important, is for the survivors that are watching, we have to be intentional about our healing. And so often life gets in the way, busyness, work, taking care of a family, it all gets in the way of really being intentional about our healing. So that's a message, and we hope we're going to be able to help you through that, because we're going to, as we talk to survivors and as we, talk to each other, we hope that we're going to be able to give you some good tools to help you in that healing process. So that's number one. Number two is that we have to be vulnerable. It's like, this is this is big stuff. Like, we didn't just heal overnight. Like, we both have been on such a long journey to healing. And I think that the vulnerability in the retreats that we have really gives people space and an opportunity to be vulnerable and to get in touch with those feelings that some of us just press down. It's like, well, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I'm fine.
Well, and our society too, we have to be good. You know,
we have to be good.
You got to put on a face, and we got to smile, and we've got children, so of course you don't want to be walking around going, I feel a little triggered today. Although I did do that. It didn't go so well because they were young, but now they're older, they understand.
So I think it's important to be intentional about our healing, and it's important to know that it's okay not to be okay, because we all want to have we want to have it all together all the time, especially survivors, because we compartmentalize so much our feelings. That I was always really good at putting on the I'm fine face. So when Phil says, "Honey, how are you?" and I say I'm fine, it's like, "Oh, are you really fine?"
I think there's Instagram reels that say when a woman says they're fine,
and they're not fine.
Oh, that's true. So true.
So Katie and I were, so for those of you that don't know it, that try to find me on social media, I have been taken down by Meta a couple of times, actually. And Katie is a guru when it comes to social media and social marketing. So she was helping me try to figure out, like, how to get to Meta, which you can't really get to Meta, but
it's tough.
But God is bigger than Meta, so we're
unless
just gonna
someone knows
hold on
anything more, because I'm not a guru. I just point and click as much as I can.
Well, anyway, we got together to her trying to help me with my problem, and she said, "You want to start a podcast?"
I know, it was so weird. It was just kind of out of the blue, too.
On my bucket list for so long, Katie. And I didn't feel equipped to do it by myself. And it's because God wanted me to do it with you. I really feel...
I got the chills.
Because I sat down so many times, like, okay, I'm going to do this. And it's like, I didn't have the right equipment. I wasn't in a studio. I didn't have the right lighting. And you know me, I like to do things with excellence.
Yeah,
I like
sure.
I like for it to look good and, make this look a little bit better than it.
Oh, come on. Don't even do that. You're amazing.
Anywho. So Katie just threw that out. And, God just had gone before us, because every single thing we needed, it seems like, and we only sat down and said this a month ago, probably less than a month ago.
But when God wants things to happen, he moves.
He moves.
He puts everybody in your path and circumstances in your path to make it easy. If it, when things are meant to be, you just flow.
So we give him all the glory for being here, for Mesmerized Media, who has been so gracious to help us get this podcast launched, and we're so grateful to them. And I'm just, I'm excited. I have a big mouth. Many that know me, that may be listening, know that. I have a really big mouth. And ever since I was a little girl, I've loved the camera. I've loved to speak in front of people. I always was fighting for the lead role in any school play, or, the little Mayflower dance. I wanted to be the one to be the MC and center of attention. So I'm so grateful that it's for such a wonderful cause, and that I truly can use the pain in my life for purpose. And I know you feel the same way. It's like it gives us no greater joy than to walk alongside a survivor and help them heal. Yeah. And just, give them.
And it's so cool that we know our stories so well, and we can vibe off of each other in a way that I think our listeners will understand that there are going to be moments that are tough to talk about, and they're tough for you to talk about. And even though we've talked about it so much, we've written books about it, which we'll get into later, it's still an emotional roller coaster, and that's okay. And that's why we're here. We're going to be strong women, and we're going to, for you guys. Yeah.
So what we thought the first couple of podcasts would be about getting to know us, because I think our time is so incredibly valuable that we want you to trust that when you tune into our podcast, that you're going to get some good, valuable information, and you're also going to know us a little more. So we're going to be vulnerable with you. We're going to share things, and our first guests are going to be our husbands. So we're really going to kind of.
Are you sure you want to do that?
I know it's going to be a little crazy, but we're gonna really let them share what it's like to be married to crazy women.
Can we have a pre-podcast meeting?
We might need to.
I mean, I'm fine with what they say, but guys, sometimes you don't know where they're going.
But I'm truly excited that I think every podcast will bring you value, but to know us and to know our hearts and to know this isn't really about, being center of attention or publicity or any of that. It's about what we felt is such a tremendous need in our society. And it's our hope and prayer that what we say may intervene and help a child not be sexually abused, may intervene in that moment or give an adult the eyes to see risky behaviors and really protect that child. So I think that's another big part of this podcast is, what can we do to protect a child? But I'm excited. So I guess Katie's going to start by interviewing me. So
you ready?
Any question you want to ask, Katie, I'm ready to answer it.
All right. Well, I guess, why don't you start by telling a little bit about your childhood?
Okay. So I had one memory of my life without abuse or before abuse. And I was in a crib, and my uncle was reaching for me. And, being in a crib, I thought, is that a real memory? Like, can you really remember that far back? So I asked my aunt, I said, I remember being in a crib and there was paneling on the wall, and my uncle his name was Uncle Puff. And I said, Uncle Puff picked me up out of that crib, and I was crying. And I just remember he had on a checkered shirt. I was like, I remember all this. Is that a real memory or is it something I made up? And she's like, no, that was a real memory.
Wow, that's incredible. How old do you think you were?
I probably was maybe 1.5.
Wow. Yeah. Isn't that crazy how we can remember something?
Yeah, probably closer to 2. But so after that, my biological father, who actually passed away about 2 weeks ago, which he never was in my life, he walked away from me as a baby. I got repeated the story over and over as a child that my mother took me to him when I was 3 years old, and he's 3 days old. I'm sorry, 3 days. Oh. 3 days old. And he said, I don't want anything to do with you, and I don't want anything to do with her. So I got repeated that throughout my childhood. And then it was 1965. My mother was a school teacher, and she was a single mom, and it wasn't as accepted socially to be single, and especially a single mom in those days. Mm-hmm. So I think she was determined to find a father for me. And so she married a man she had only known briefly. And I truly think we were targeted. I think he saw the opportunity. They married when I was almost 3. And the abuse started immediately. It was horrific. It was torture.
So there was no grooming. Mm-mm. And by the way, grooming, just for people who, I'm sure it's more prevalent now, that the word, but grooming is when someone does little things at a time to gain the trust of the child and the child's parent. But it sounds like with you, it was just full on. He had full.
No, he started. We were living in a little apartment, and some of the first most horrific things I remember him doing is he would sit this giant bowl of oatmeal in front of me and give me 20 seconds to eat it. So I would just be choking down this oatmeal, trying to throw up. I couldn't throw it up. He would lock me in. I was raised in Savannah, so it was really in the summertime, very hot, 100-degree weather was nothing. And he would lock me in a car with the windows up until I nearly suffocated, just screaming for him to open the door. I mean, just really torturesome things that made me feel like he had total power and control.
So he was more like a fear-based type.
Very fear-based. Mm-hmm. And so, I have just memories of him touching me, feeling that he would make me sit in a rocking chair. This is one really prevalent memory. He'd make me sit in a rocking chair, a little bitty little child's rocking chair, all day long for hours, and not be able to get up and not be able to go to the bathroom. So if I wet my pants, he would use that opportunity to clean me up and to sexually abuse me. But then it was my fault because I wet my pants. It was just this weird psychological game he played with me, that it was always my fault for being punished, and I was always a bad girl. Mm-hmm. And so the abuse just progressed, from one year to the next. It would just get more and more severe and more. And the first rape I remember was, and it could have happened before, but just the real profound, brutal rape was around 7 or 8 years old. I remember at the kitchen table, my feet couldn't touch the floor. Mm-hmm. They were just dangling. And I remember after it happened, I was kind kind of in a maze, like what just happened to me. And I remember at dinner, he was being really cruel, and he was taking the fork, and I had my elbow on the table, and he was jabbing my elbow with the fork for me to get.
Wait a minute. What's with abusers and forks? Because that's in my book.
Yeah, I know.
Mine did the same thing with the fork thing.
I know, it's
like
crazy.
It's so weird.
But anyway, it just got worse and worse and worse, and I survived. I made straight A's. I tried to keep peace. I tried to navigate the minefields in my home. And when the explosions happened, they were big, and I've never felt like I had anybody to protect me. There was never, everybody looked the other way. I say that the people who should have recognized and saved me and helped me, I think they were just paralyzed in fear. So I had extended family that looked the other way. I had teachers that there were certain signs. I tried to kill myself in 3rd grade with vitamin A. I took a whole bottle of vitamin A.
Wait a minute. So 3rd grade, you were 8?
8. Probably that happened probably right after the really brutal rape. I did. I tried, and I told my teacher, I said, I'm going to lay my head on my desk, and I probably won't wake up because I took a whole bottle of vitamin A. Yeah. Well,
gosh, what did your teacher
vitamin
say?
A doesn't do it.
I know, but was she concerned? I mean, she just, again,
they brought my parents in, and I talk about this in my book too, From Sorrows to Sapphires. They brought my parents in, and my parents just said, she's just such a dramatic child, and she lies. She lies all the time. So he had groomed my mother. You talk about grooming. He had groomed people around me to think that I was just a liar, that I didn't ever tell the truth. And so that was kind of dismissed. I tried in 4th grade. I told a teacher I had been raped, and I couldn't say my stepfather, so I accused another child. And so, again, they called my parents in and said, well, she's just, she just has been watching too many soap operas. She got that word off of soap opera, and they just kind of glazed it over. But I remember when I got home, I got one of the worst beatings I had ever had. And so.
By your stepfather?
Yeah. Oh. So he's like, you will never open your mouth again. And so at that point, I think he wanted to keep me silent. So he threatened killing my mom if I ever told. And then if I ever got rebellious or ever talked back or anything, he would be extra abusive to her. Like he would say, look what you're causing. Look what you're forcing me to do. And then at that point, I had siblings that I wanted to protect. I didn't want them to have to suffer. So at that point, I just, and other people, there were pediatricians. Pediatricians need to know the signs and symptoms. They could have stepped in. Sunday school teachers, there were people, they weren't in my life a lot. But neighbors heard the screaming. Neighbors saw me being beaten with a shovel and a hoe out in the yard. Neighbors saw at one point he dressed me up in a diaper. He stripped all my clothes off. He put a diaper on me.
At what
age? This time I was probably 10. Let's see, my sister.
So too old to be wearing a diaper.
11. I was 11.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I was 11. I had changed they brought my sister home from the hospital. I had changed her diaper. He was furious. This is back when they used cloth diapers and pins. So he was furious that I may have stuck her or hurt her. So at 11, he stripped me, put on a diaper, put me on a bicycle, and made me ride my bicycle in the front yard on grass. Do you know how hard it is to ride a bicycle on grass? And had to ride that in front of all the neighbors driving by, laughing. So it was really, so when... I don't even know how I survived all that. I don't even know. But at 12, I was in church and got the gospel preached to me, got the word of God, and it was a fire and brimstone type of sermon. But I just remember, if you need to be delivered, you need to run to the altar. Jesus is going to deliver you from whatever you're going through. Honey, I made a beeline. I was like, get out of my way. I'm going to get some Jesus.
Was your stepfather and mom there?
My mom was there, not my stepfather. So I ran to the front and then came home and thought, oh, I'm going to be delivered. I'm going to be delivered. I'm going to be delivered. I just know it. And still nothing. 3 years later, at 15, I tried to find my biological father. It's a long story, but I made the cheerleading squad and knew that our camp was at Georgia Southern, and that's where he lived. It was an hour away from Savannah. So, us survivors, it was like I was kind of contemplating and manipulating. It's like, okay, how can I do this? So I had the girls put pillows in my bed, like I was there, and I snuck out in the middle of the night, and I called him. And when he met me, it was just real obvious. There was no love, compassion. There was nothing there. So I kind of went back very devastated from that cheerleading camp, thinking he's not going to rescue me either. So it was another couple of years that I finally broke, emotionally, physically, mentally broke, just detached from reality, and thought I can't and won't be raped again. I won't be beaten again. I'm done. I'm just done. He had been extremely abusive that day, had found some letters that I had been corresponding with my grandmother, my biological father's mother. And he found those letters and just started screaming that no one wanted me. They don't want me. They don't, they're not going to help me. They're not going to save me. And so I just flipped and went out on the swing in the backyard. It was cold. It was January. Had a T-shirt on and jeans and barefoot. And I just sat on that swing for, I don't know, what seemed like days. It was hours. It was from probably, he worked shift work. So he left for work around 2. I was on the swing when he left. He was screaming at me to get inside. The whole blow up happened around noon. So at 2, I was still on the swing. And then at 9:30 at night, or around 8 or 9, it got dark. My mother was screaming at me to come in, and I could not move off that swing. I just couldn't move. I hadn't eaten anything all day. And you have a question. I know you're looking at me.
Well, just for, I guess, our viewers, when you said you were on the swing all day, like kind of frozen, do you think that's a trauma response, or were you shut down in shock? Like, what do you think now, knowing what you know?
I was just chanting almost. So I think I just disassociated from reality at that point. And we're going to talk about, I think, in some of our shows, I definitely want to talk about disassociation. Yeah. But I think I just something clicked and I disassociated from reality. Like I didn't even know what time it was. But I do know that whoever took over in my mind, they started making a plan of suicide. So they started, okay, you're gonna go steal the checkbook. You're gonna go there's a bottle of vodka under this kitchen sink. You're gonna grab a bottle of vodka. You're gonna get the keys to the car. Like I was making a plan of how I was gonna escape and how I was gonna kill myself that night. So it's very clear that I was going through, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And then I was like, I'm gonna just sit on the swing till my mom goes to sleep. Like she always went to sleep 9:30. So I thought, I'm just going to sit here till she goes to sleep. So the minute I saw the light go out, I went inside. I was like a robot. I got what I knew I needed. I needed the checkbook. People don't even know what a checkbook is these days, but there was no Venmo, there was no Zelle. But I know I needed the checkbook because I was going to stop at the 7-Eleven and I was going to buy sleeping pills. So I pushed the car out of the driveway. I got in. I cranked it up when it was out of sound. I drove to the 7-Eleven. I tried to write a check for 2 bottles of Salmonex. There was a man, the lady wouldn't take my check. Like she obviously knew I was distraught. She knew this woman's buying 2 bottles of sleeping pills.
Oh, I just got the chills.
There was a man behind me that laid the cash on the counter. I know. It's like, who would have done that but the devil? Got the sleeping pills, got in the car, still very robotic, and just drove to what was called the quarter mile. It was right outside. It was kind of a park and necking place. People don't know what necking is either.
Yeah,
our younger generation's going to get educated.
What is that?
Necking, where you go to make out, like the quarter mile, like a little place in the woods.
I thought you were saying naked.
No, naked.
Naked.
It's my Southern accent, honey. You've got to learn how to speak Southern if we're going to do this together.
I know, I get it. But that's what makes, anyways.
I know. I can't understand her sometimes because of her Spanish accent. So anyway, so it's a place that people went to make out. I have to say, yes, I had been there before with a boyfriend. So I turned the car off. I wrote my last entry in my journal, and I started taking those sleeping pills with the vodka straight, and made sure that I took all 64 sleeping pills. There were 32 in each bottle. I just remember so clearly holding that bottle up, got one bottle down. I thought, okay, now I got to get the next bottle down. Took every single one of those sleeping pills, drank that, I don't know, half a bottle of vodka. And remember, like everyone who describes a near-death experience, the bright light, and I remember sinking into those bucket seats and, whew, sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
I just so distinctly remember that it was so peaceful, and I thought, and I was asking God to forgive me because I knew suicide was a sin in my heart, like I knew, but I just was bargaining with God and saying, please let me into heaven because there's no other way. Like I can't do this anymore. And I wrote in my journal, I wrote the last goodbye to my mother. And I said, if you want to know why this happened, you can read the entire journal. I used to write in cryptic, but anyone could put two and two together. Mm-hmm. And just really thought I was leaving this world. And I don't know how. I don't remember doing it. But I just remember falling out into the cold dirt and then just started vomiting profusely and then just vomited all the pills. It was just green and it was gross and I was covered in vomit and woke up just screaming, God, how could I have lived? Like, how could this have happened? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And just hysterical.
You had an angel. So when you thought there was nobody protecting you.
Oh, I know God opened that door. And I praise God every day that I didn't succeed, that I didn't take my life, that I'm not a vegetable, that I'm not in a brain, I didn't brain damage, I didn't have results. But, I'm very determined. You know that about me. I'm extremely determined. So I got in the car and I thought, okay, I didn't do it that way. I got to do it another way. So I went to the Talmadge Bridge. Mind you, it's probably 30 degrees. I'm barefoot in a T-shirt and blue jeans, climbed up the Talmadge Bridge. I just remember how cold that metal was, that my hands were almost like sticking to the metal. And I looked down at that black swirling water, and I didn't have the courage to hold on, but I didn't have the courage to let go. I just, if anybody's ever been in that position, and I pray not, but whew, it takes a lot of courage to take your life. It does, to jump into a black hole, and that's what it looked like.
I know. That's why it's just crazy how many survivors do contemplate it because they're in so much pain. But
So I then decided, okay, I'm on a bridge. There was a lot of truck traffic coming back and forth, so I thought, you know what? I'll drive over the bridge on the wrong way, on the wrong side of the road, and I'll have a head-on, and that'll do it because there was so much truck traffic. As I started to crest the top of the hill, all I could think was, I'm going to hurt somebody else. I'm going to kill somebody else. And I couldn't do that. And so I pulled over on that asphalt, cold asphalt. My knees hit the cement, hit the concrete, and just started praying and just heard a small voice, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's kind of the beginning of the end of my abuse, but the beginning of my healing journey. And for anybody that is contemplating suicide, I just want to tell you that please don't take your life. Please stop the plan and get help. Like, tell somebody. Like, tell a friend, tell a pastor, tell a family member, tell somebody, because I had no one to tell, and had I spoken up to anybody, I think hopefully somebody I would like to think would have gotten help for me. I went through many years of trying to heal, and praise God, as in your life too, God brought me an amazing man, my husband, who has walked with me, has loved me, has been my rock, has just encouraged me, been that tender, sweet voice to hold me up. And then I got the calling. I started writing my book because a therapist told me one time there was more room on the outside than there is on the inside. So I'll let you I'll stop now because that's the history of my sexual abuse, and let you dive in.
Well, on the note of your history of your child's sexual abuse, what do you feel like? Can you go back to when you were a child? Like, how, just so that people can relate, because the R word, rape, is so heavy, and it's so...
It is.
Yeah, but I think for someone who a lot of times thinks, oh, it was no big deal, it was just this or was that, and they don't want to call it rape, like, maybe explain how you felt as a child.
Sure.
Like, how did you know it was wrong, or how did you know that it was rape?
Well, I didn't. Obviously, a little child doesn't know sexual context or sexual words. So I didn't know at the time. I knew it was very painful. It was very humiliating. And I just knew, inherently you feel that shame. You just know. But I say the word rape because I think the word molestation is a very soft word for what happens. So I apologize if I've offended anyone that is listening. I do apologize. But we've got to say these words. We've got to help you understand what happens to a child.
Yeah.
We can't glaze over with a big word that nobody really knows what it is. So I think that hits the chord. But I, as a little girl, I was just totally I lived in fear of my stepfather, what he was going to do to me, what he was going to do to my mom, what he was going to do to my sisters. I lived in total fear. As a child, I can remember being in kindergarten and looking around and hearing the nursery rhymes being sung and just feeling like I am so different than anyone here. I am so different. I was isolated in my own thoughts and my own shame and my own pain, even as a little girl. I remember carrying that around with me. And I think that's probably why I wanted to excel so much, because I wanted to feel valued, and I didn't feel valued.
Well, and you probably wanted to feel heard and seen, because we all want that, especially if we don't have it.
Yeah. I think that is a big part of it.
Well, how has your child sexual abuse affected your relationships in general, as a whole, like as an adult?
Trust, I would say, is the number one issue. It's very difficult for me to trust you, and to have good boundaries. Either may sometimes, if I get a hint that I can trust you or I see something in you, I may just like smother you like I do you. But if I don't trust you, then my guard comes up, my wall comes up immediately. And I'm really hesitant to give people second chances, which God has really helped me with that, to have more grace and more forgiveness in my heart. But I would say I don't trust people the way that innocent that was taken as a child. I think you develop that in that innocence. So in my relationship with my husband, it has been devastating at times. It's been devastating that he's wanted to love me and be intimate with me, and I'm trapped in these memories, or I'm trapped in triggering, or he says something and I immediately impose my stepfather's brutality on top of it, when he just had a very gentle message for me, and it didn't. But you get triggered.
Yeah,
you have a filter. So I think it's there go by the grace of God that I've been married for 40 years, but it's just having a good godly man that was going to stand and fight for me. I mean, fight. And when I say fight, that man has fought for me, for my happiness, for our family, for our family's happiness. So in that relationship, and I think, of course, it impacts relationships with your family. It has. I love my mother. I honor my mother, but I can't say that this hasn't impacted my relationship with my mother. So in a lot of different ways of hurting because she did not protect me, but trying to have compassion for her, that she was too abused. She was in a place of abuse that she could not get herself out of. So if you can't protect yourself, it's hard to protect your child.
Right. Absolutely. So I guess that leads in, how did that change you? You kind of already talked about that, but how about maybe fast forward, how has it changed you as far as finding that inner strength? Like what led you here now? So,
Oh, wow. We're going to break this into a couple of podcasts, aren't we? And, how has it changed?
Well, just because
me?
a lot of, you hear people who have been abused, they'll either abuse others, or they go into prostitution or drug abuse or alcoholism.
Well, it's been a journey. I can't say that I valued myself as a young woman, and certainly went down some really dark paths. But where I am today and how I got here is I really was intentional about my healing, and really did receive just the grace that God has to give us through my relationship with Jesus Christ. So I think the abuse, honestly, today has changed me for the better, because I don't take for granted 1 second of happiness, of joy, of peace, of I try to be present in the moment and not let those memories take me back to that dark place. And then I try to just love people where they are. I've walked along a lot of survivors' paths of healing and just try to just a great deal of compassion and understanding. So sure. I think it's changed me for the better, and I think it definitely has made me a warrior.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of anything.
Ferocious
or
warrior.
anybody. So it's made me a warrior.
Yeah,
it's made me want to stand up and fight for justice, fight for children, fight for survivors. And I have fought at the Capitol, and I have fought in the media, and I have fought on the courthouse
laws
steps.
here in Georgia. Yeah.
I have fought in courtrooms, so I have fought, and I am not done fighting. We've only just begun.
Yeah.
So,
amen. I love that. Yes. We're gonna definitely, hopefully, change the environment of our children for the better. This has to stop. I mean, come on. It's insane. And the more information that we have, the more we find out about how they're doing this to our children, how they creep in. It's crazy. So, yeah, we'll definitely have some good tips and pointers and some aha moments. Even me, like, I thought I knew everything. And it's like, I haven't even touched the beginning. So we know you've written some books. We said it at the top of our podcast. But there's two really cool books.
Well, they're my memoirs. So I feel like if our listeners want to get to know me and want to get my story, I mean, I just told you bits and pieces of my story that it's a lot to it. But my first book that I wrote, and really this started the journey on my advocacy work from sorrows to sapphires. It's based on Isaiah 54:11. Oh, you storm-tossed and not comforted, I will set your stones in fair colors and your foundations of sapphires. So it was kind of God's promise to me that I could leave the past behind and have a foundation going forward that was going to be beautiful. And that's kind of how that scripture spoke to me.
But I never knew that.
So I tell people that this book is the little girl telling the story. It gives the little girl a voice. And it really, for someone that has no clue what sexual abuse does to a child, has no clue kind of the dynamic of their life, that this really educates. But survivors, to read it really helps you come along in the journey with me to healing. And then my latest book that I released last September is Loving Me After Abuse. And this book really helps me give you some practical steps of things that I've done over my life to love myself. I mean, that's the biggest thing, Katie, right?
Yeah.
We have that shame, and we have to kind of peel off those layers of shame to look in the mirror and say, hey, I really like that person.
You really got very vulnerable in there. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved reading it. It has some really good prayers.
Well, that's my jam. That's my jam, to be vulnerable, to put it out there, and hopefully it helps somebody. I put it out there to help somebody.
Well, with all your books, you definitely have.
So if anybody wants to, I am the founder of Angela's Voice, so you can go to angelasvoice.com. And just hit resources, and you can see there's 14 books that I've written that all relate to healing and prevention of child sexual abuse. And we'll bring some of the books in, and we'll kind of spend some time looking at the books and kind of tell you more about them. But the ones that I'm most proud of, my son wrote, and they're the Find Your Voice program for children for 5 to 3K. So and they're really cute books. Is that
the
Gracie and Grant, my little characters. Yeah, so they're really cool.
Well, we've gotten to know you a little bit better.
Yes.
We know where to find all your resources and your amazing books about your past, your vulnerabilities, your abuse, and your healing. So after every podcast, we wanted each other or our guests to have a voice of inspiration.
Yes.
So that we can leave on a positive note and something out there for the universe to grasp. So what would be your voice of inspiration today?
I really thought about this, and I want our viewers to know that you are enough. I think not just as a survivor of child sexual abuse and of childhood trauma, because abuse comes in a lot of flavors, but we tend to feel like we never measure up. We tend to feel like we compare ourselves to others. And I just want to say that God designed you to be uniquely you and for a purpose. And there's no one else in the whole world that looks like you, that sounds like you, that has your gifts and talents, and that has your God-given purpose. So you are absolutely enough to do everything that God has called you to do. So that's my voice of inspiration today.
Yay, I love it. Thank you so much, Angela, for coming and sharing, and for being the voice of inspiration.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.